The date is March 23, 1945, and the Third Reich is gasping its final bloody breaths near the town of Speyer in southwest Germany. The landscape is a gray and brown hellscape of churned mud and shattered concrete, where the relentless advance of the United States 7th Army has ground the Wehrmacht into the dirt. It is a cold morning, the kind of damp European cold that bypasses the wool of a uniform and settles directly into the marrow of a man's bones. Riding on the back of a 30-ton Sherman tank is Staff Sergeant Edward A. Carter, Jr., a man who has traveled halfway around the world to find himself staring at a warehouse 400 yards across an open, featureless rape field. The air smells of diesel exhaust cordite and the metallic tang of thawing snow. Carter is 30 years old, a volunteer in the 12th Armored Division, also known as the Hellcats. But today, there is nothing fast or sleek about their situation. They are exposed. They are vulnerable, and they are moving directly into a kill zone that the German defenders have had weeks to triangulate. The tank beneath Carter roars with the deafening mechanical scream of its Ford GAA Phi 8 engine, the tracks chewing up the frozen earth as they lurch forward. Carter grips the cold steel of the turret, his eyes scanning the windows of the warehouse ahead. It looks abandoned, a hollowed-out shell of industry, but combat experience has taught Edward Carter that emptiness is usually a lie. Silence in war is simply the deep breath before the scream. Suddenly the world detonates. A Panzerfaust warhead, or perhaps a high-velocity anti-tank round, slams into the lead armor. Or perhaps it is simply the overwhelming volume of small arms fire that forces the convoy to a halt. The details are lost in the chaos of the moment. What matters is that the tank is no longer a shelter. It is a target. Carter knows that staying on the hole means death. He vaults off the side of the steel beast, his boots hitting the mud with a wet thud, and immediately the air around him begins to snap and hiss with the passage of hundreds of German bullets. The infantry squad is pinned down. Men are pressing their faces into the mud, praying for the earth to swallow them whole, as the German MG-42 machine guns in the warehouse open up with their terrifying cyclic rate of 1,200 rounds per minute. It sounds like ripping canvas, a continuous tear in the fabric of reality that shreds wood, flesh, and bone with equal indifference. But Sergeant Carter does not freeze. He is acting on instinct honed not just in this war, but in conflicts that most of the men around him have only read about in history books. He realizes that if they stay here pinned behind the tank, the German mortars will find them and turn them into pink mist. The only way out is through. He taps 3 men on the shoulder, signaling them to follow. They are going to cross that open ground. They are going to assault the warehouse. It is a suicide mission, but staying put is a death sentence. They move out, crouched low, sprinting through the knee-high winter grass. The German gunners shift their fire, tracking the 4 figures struggling across the field. One by one, the men behind Carter are cut down. The first man drops without a sound, a bullet finding his heart. The second screams as his leg is shattered by a heavy rifle round. The third is killed instantly by a burst of machine gun fire that walks across his chest. Edward Carter is now alone. He is 150 yards from safety, exposed in the middle of a killing field, with the entire defensive line of the warehouse focused solely on him. He does not stop. He keeps moving his Thompson submachine gun heavy in his hands, his breath tearing at his lungs. The first bullet hits him in the left arm, punching through the bicep and spinning him around. The pain is a white-hot lance, but he keeps his feet. He stumbles forward. The second bullet strikes him in the leg, shattering bone and severing muscle. This time, Carter goes down, crashing into the dirt. The impact knocks the wind out of him, but the adrenaline coursing through his veins is a powerful narcotic. He tries to rise to push himself up with his good arm, but the air is filled with lead. A third bullet slams into his hand, destroying the knuckles and rendering his left hand useless. A fourth round tears through his uniform and grazes his torso. But the fifth shot is the one that should have ended it. A bullet strikes him in the jaw, smashing through tissue and bone, filling his mouth with the taste of copper and broken teeth. The force of the impact snaps his head back and leaves him sprawling on his back, staring up at the gray, overcast German sky. The pain is no longer localized. It is a total consuming fire that threatens to drag him into unconsciousness. He lies there in the snow, the blood pumping out of 5 separate wounds, staining the white ground, a brilliant, horrifying crimson. To the German observers in the warehouse, the American soldier is finished. They have seen men die thousands of times, and the way Carter fell, the way his body crumpled and lay still, indicates a fatal hit. The firing from the warehouse slackens. The heavy machine guns fall silent, their barrels smoking in the cold air. A strange, ringing silence descends over the field, broken only by the distant thrum of the tank engines far behind him. Carter is fading. His vision is tunneling the edges of his sight, turning gray, but his mind is still working. He knows that if he moves, if he twitches a muscle, the machine guns will open up again and finish the job. He has to be dead. He has to become a corpse. He forces his breathing to shallow, imperceptible rhythms. He relaxes his muscles, allowing his limbs to sprawl in the unnatural angles of the dead. The cold ground sucks the heat from his body, accelerating the shock, but he welcomes the numbness. It dulls the agony in his arm, his leg, his hand, his face. He listens. He waits. Minutes drag by like hours. The snow begins to fall again, light flakes settling on his eyelashes, melting against the feverish heat of his skin. Then he hears it. Voices. German voices. They are confident, laughing, the sound of boots crunching on the frozen crust of the mud. They are coming to inspect their kill. They are coming to loot the body for cigarettes, for souvenirs, for intelligence. They think they are walking toward a corpse. They do not realize they are walking toward Edward Carter, and they do not know who he is. To understand why Edward Carter is still conscious, why he is lying in a pool of his own blood, plotting the murder of the men approaching him, rather than making his peace with God, one must understand that this is not his first war. Most of the men in the United States Army in 1945 are draftees, farm boys from Iowa, or factory workers from Detroit, who had never held a weapon before boot camp. Edward Carter is a different breed entirely. He was born in Los Angeles in 1916, the son of an African-American missionary father and an East Indian mother. He did not grow up playing baseball in sandlots. He grew up in Calcutta, India, and later in Shanghai, China. He was raised in a world of colonial empires and violent revolutions, a world where strength was the only currency that mattered. As a child in Shanghai, he watched the rise of Japanese aggression. He saw the brutality of the occupation, the way the Imperial Japanese Army treated the Chinese citizens. It ignited a fire in him, a warrior spirit that could not be contained by school books or scripture. In 1932, at the age of 15, Edward Carter ran away from home. He did not run away to join a circus. He ran away to join the Chinese Nationalist Army, to fight the Japanese invaders during the Shanghai incident. He was a boy, legally and physically, but he lied about his age. He was tall, strong, and possessed a ferocity that impressed the Chinese officers. He rose to the rank of lieutenant in the Chinese army, commanding men twice his age, in brutal close quarters, city fighting against one of the most disciplined military forces on the planet. But his father eventually found him, discovered his deception, and brought him back to the safety of the mission. Yet the die was cast. Carter had tasted combat. He had seen the elephant. He knew that his purpose on this earth was not to preach, but to fight. He studied at a military academy in Shanghai, learning 4 languages along the way: English, Hindi, Mandarin, and German. This linguistic ability would become a crucial weapon in his arsenal, a tool that would one day save his life in a snowy field in Germany. But China was not enough. In 1936, when the Spanish Civil War erupted, Carter felt the pull of the battlefield once again. He made his way to Spain and joined the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, an integrated unit of American volunteers fighting against the fascist forces of General Francisco Franco. In Spain, Carter fought with a savage intensity. He was not just a soldier, he was a true believer in the fight against fascism. He learned the art of the ambush, the mechanics of the machine gun, the psychological weight of artillery. He fought until 1938, when the international brigades were forced to withdraw. He returned to the United States in 1940, a seasoned veteran of 2 wars, a man who had commanded troops in combat, a man who had faced death in the rubble of Shanghai and the olive groves of Spain. He expected to be welcomed into the United States Army as an asset, a valuable resource in the looming war against Hitler. He walked into the recruiting station with his head held high, ready to serve his country with the same skill he had lent to China and Spain. However, the United States Army of 1941 was not an organization based on merit. It was an institution deeply segregated and paralyzed by institutional racism. When Carter enlisted his combat experience, his officer rank in the Chinese Army, and his time in Spain were viewed not as qualifications, but as liabilities. The Army intelligence officers looked at his file and saw a black man who had fought for foreign armies, who had associated with socialists in Spain, and who spoke fluent German and Chinese. They did not see a hero, they saw a potential subversive. They saw a files person, someone to be watched, tracked, and kept away from the front lines. Instead of being sent to officer candidate school, where his experience would have been invaluable, Carter was assigned to a mess hall. He was made a cook. For a man who had led charges against Japanese bayonets and held the line against Franco's fascists, washing dishes and peeling potatoes was a humiliation deeper than any wound. But Carter was a soldier. He did his duty. He was eventually moved to a quartermaster unit, driving trucks, moving supplies, doing the heavy lifting that the Army deemed suitable for African American soldiers. He watched as white officers with 0 combat experience were given commands, while he, a veteran of 2 wars, was treated like a laborer. But the war was grinding on, and the insatiable hunger of the Western Front for manpower began to erode the walls of segregation. By late 1944, after the devastating losses during the Battle of the Bulge, the Army faced a critical shortage of riflemen. General Dwight D. Eisenhower made a desperate, unprecedented decision. He authorized the formation of volunteer infantry platoons composed of African American soldiers to serve within white divisions. This was the 5th platoon concept. Black soldiers could volunteer for combat duty, but they would have to give up their current ranks and start over as privates. They would be used to plug the gaps in the line. Edward Carter did not hesitate. He was a staff sergeant in his supply unit, a safe job, a comfortable rank. He stripped off his stripes. He signed the papers. He accepted the demotion to private just for the chance to look the enemy in the eye again. He was assigned to the 12th Armored Division, attached to the 56th Armored Infantry Battalion. He was technically a private, but you cannot hide a warrior. His new commanders, desperate for competence, quickly realized that Carter was not a fresh recruit. His movement under fire, his handling of weapons, his calm demeanor when the mortars started falling, it all screamed of experience. Within a short time, his officers restored his rank of staff sergeant, albeit in an acting capacity. They needed him to lead. And so we returned to the frozen field near Speyer. We returned to the body lying in the snow. This is not a terrified draftee praying for his mother. This is a man who has been forged in the fires of Shanghai and Madrid. This is a man who speaks the language of the enemy approaching him. As the German footsteps get closer, crunching loudly in the stillness, Carter is not thinking about the pain in his shattered hand or the hole in his jaw. He is calculating distance. He is estimating the number of targets. He is waiting for them to get close enough that he cannot miss. He knows they are coming to loot a corpse. He is about to show them that this corpse is the most dangerous thing they will ever encounter. The abyss has stared into Edward Carter, and Edward Carter has stared back, and he has decided that he is not ready to blink. The footsteps are now agonizingly close, perhaps 10 yards away. Carter hears the muffled exchange of German voices, relaxed and contemptuous, clearly audible in the unnatural silence of the battlefield. He catches fragmented words: Amerikaner, Schwarz, Tote, which translate simply to American, black, dead. They are not cautious. They are victorious. There are 6 of them, 3 to the left, 3 to the right, sweeping in a ragged arc. They are young replacement troops, perhaps, or maybe veterans grown careless in the confidence of a successful kill. Carter can smell them now, the faint, acrid scent of cheap tobacco and stale uniform wool. One of the Germans stops directly over him, the shadow of his heavy greatcoat falling across Carter's face, obscuring the weak light. This German soldier carries a Kar 98K rifle, its wooden stock dark with oil and grime, its barrel cold steel. The crucial mistake is made when the lead German, seeing the multiple entry wounds and the sheer volume of blood, deems the risk negligible. He lowers his weapon, resting the buttstock on the snow, and reaches out with a gloved hand to roughly turn Carter's body over, presumably to search his pockets, or perhaps examine the weapon that lies a few inches away, Carter's M1 carbine. This is the invasion of his personal space, the ultimate gesture of contempt for a fallen foe, and the precise trigger Carter has been waiting for. The instant the gloved hand brushes his shoulder, Edward Carter's calculated stillness explodes into a raw, primal motion. It is not an elegant movement. It is a spasm of pain driven by sheer will. His right arm, the good one, snaps up from the snow. His good hand, rigid with the white-knuckle strength of desperation and fury, snatches the M1 carbine. This weapon is light maneuverable and reliable, designed for exactly this kind of close-in brutality. He swings the barrel upward and squeezes the trigger once. The blast is deafening in the sudden silence, a sharp, flat crack that punches through the cold air. The German standing over him has no time to even register the sound. The 7.62 2mm round hits him squarely in the chest, tearing through his thin uniform and vest, dropping him instantly onto Carter's legs, a warm, heavy sack of dead weight. Blood sprays onto Carter's face, mixing instantly with his own blood and the melting snow. The sudden, impossible resurrection of the supposedly dead man shatters the German formation. The remaining 5 soldiers freeze their moment of arrogance, instantly replaced by raw, paralyzing terror. But Carter does not wait for them to recover. He is roaring now, though the sound is distorted and wet, due to the massive trauma to his jaw, more a guttural, wounded animal sound than a human cry. He rolls violently to the left, shaking off the dead weight, ignoring the fire of agony in his shattered leg. He fires the M1 again, not aiming carefully, but sweeping the rifle along the line of figures now scrambling to raise their own weapons. The second German, frozen in shock, catches a round in his neck and collapses gurgling. The surviving 4 soldiers finally react, scattering and opening fire. The muzzle flashes blinding in the gray light. But they are panicking, firing wildly at the ghost that just stood up. Carter empties the rest of the clip, 12 rounds of destruction before the weapon clicks empty. He drops the now useless carbine, and immediately his eyes lock onto the 2 closest German soldiers, who are diving for cover behind the mound of a bomb crater. His brain, honed by years of battlefield experience, calculates the impossible. He is wounded 5 times. His leg is useless, and his gun is empty, but he is closer to the German positions than his own. He grabs the helmet of the German soldier he had shot first and uses the man's body as a temporary shield, shoving the corpse forward as he attempts to drag himself into the bomb crater. Two of the Germans, realizing the American is nearly incapacitated, decide to rush him, hoping to finish the job with bayonets or butt strokes. They are screaming in German a torrent of panicked military jargon, which Carter understands perfectly. He manages to draw his standard issue Colt 1911 pistol from his holster, the heavy .45 caliber automatic feeling impossibly large in his shaking right hand. The two rushing Germans are less than 5 yards away when Carter begins to fire again. The sound of the .45 is deeper, a heavy, dull thud that contrasts with the crack of the M1. He fires 3 times the massive man-stopping power of the pistol rounds, slamming into the two charging men, arresting their momentum with brutal finality. They fall sideways into the mud. That leaves 2. The remaining German soldiers, witnessing this impossible bloody massacre orchestrated by a man who should be dead, have had enough. They drop their weapons, raising their hands, their faces pale with shock and surrender. They realize they are not fighting a man, they are fighting an apparition. Carter pauses, the smoking pistol held steady in his right hand. The field is silent again, but this time it is the absolute silence of carnage. 5 German bodies lie motionless around him, forming a gruesome, bloody perimeter. The 6th German soldier, the one who surrendered, drops his rifle and stands trembling. Carter, through the agony and the broken fragments of his jaw, manages to spit out a single word in flawless, hard German: Karten. Maps. The surviving 2 Germans, stunned by the ferocity and the unexpected linguistic command, immediately and without question, point back toward the warehouse, and one of them gestures toward his jacket pocket, revealing a small, folded map. Edward Carter, bleeding from 5 holes and fighting off the tidal wave of shock, forces the 2 prisoners to their feet. He takes the map from the pockets of one of the men. It is an overlay detailed with the precise positions of the machine gun nests, the sniper locations, and the communication trenches within the warehouse complex. It is a gold mine of intelligence. With his legs barely functional, Carter uses the 2 terrified German prisoners as human crutches and shields. He begins the agonizing 100-yard crawl back toward the pinned-down American lines. This retreat is perhaps the most incredible part of the entire ordeal. He is dragging 2 frightened men, 1 map, and himself through the mud and falling snow, fully exposed to whatever remaining fire might come from the warehouse. But the enemy is disorganized and demoralized. The unexpected counterattack, the savage efficiency of the dead American, has broken their will to fight. They cannot believe that a man who took 5 hits could get up and kill 6 of their comrades. As he approaches the American lines, the tankers and infantrymen who had witnessed the entire brutal spectacle cannot believe their eyes. A black shadow, blood-soaked and staggering, emerges from the haze of smoke, dragging 2 gray-clad German prisoners, one of whom is openly weeping. They rush out to meet him, tearing their first aid kits open. Carter collapses onto the muddy ground, the weight of the 2 German prisoners finally released. He keeps the map clutched tightly in his bloody right hand. Before he allows the medics to touch him, he shoves the map at the nearest lieutenant, gasping out fragmented intelligence through his ruined mouth. Sector, dry, G, Nessede, rechts. Sector 3, machine gun nest right. Then the world turns black as the pain finally wins. The immediate result of Sergeant Carter's action was the salvation of his platoon and the swift seizure of the objective. The intelligence contained on the captured map allowed the 12th Armored Division's forces to bypass the heaviest German defenses and eliminate the 2 remaining critical machine gun nests with surgical precision. This single-handed act of impossible brutality accelerated the entire push toward the Rhine River. Within hours, the Hellcats were moving again, turning the German defensive position into a routed retreat. 5 Germans were dead by Carter's hand, 2 were captured, and the map he provided saved untold American lives and days of fighting. Edward Carter was taken to a field hospital. The medical report was a testament to his impossible survival. The 5 wounds were grievous A through-and-through wound to the left arm, a severe compound fracture, and tissue damage to the left leg, partial destruction of the left hand, a laceration across the torso, and the devastating gunshot wound to the jaw. Miraculously, no rounds hit a major artery or the central nervous system, but the damage was extensive and permanent. He would spend months in recovery, enduring multiple surgeries. He had cheated death in the snow, but he would carry the scars, physical and psychological, for the rest of his life. For his actions on March 23, 1945, Staff Sergeant Edward A. Carter, Jr. was immediately nominated for the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States. His officers saw his act not just as courage, but as a supernatural singular event that deserved the highest recognition. But the political and social climate of 1945 was a venomous thing, and racism possessed a long, suffocating reach even in the final days of the war. The recommendation went up the chain of command, passing through the same institutional layers that had once deemed Carter only fit to peel potatoes. His combat record, his extraordinary heroism, was weighed against the contents of his pre-war intelligence file. The intelligence officers, still suspicious of his service in the integrated Abraham Lincoln Brigade during the Spanish Civil War, saw a potential communist sympathizer, a man whose international service made him politically unreliable. In the segregated army of that time, it was politically unpalatable to award the nation's highest honor to an African-American soldier with a politically ambiguous past, especially when such an award would have necessitated an immediate and massive review of the Army's segregationist policies. The Medal of Honor nomination was quietly downgraded. The political files won out over the battlefield record. Edward Carter was instead awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest award for valor, a significant honor, but one that deliberately muted the full scale of his heroism and allowed the Army to maintain its convenient silence on the matter of race and service. He received the award, accepted the honor, and the Army transferred him to the reserves. The man who had faced 3 wars, who had been shot 5 times, and rose from the dead to kill 6 enemies and capture vital intelligence, was discharged with a quiet and almost dismissive farewell. When he returned to civilian life, the shadow of his service followed him. During the height of the Cold War and the McCarthy era, the intelligence file that had prevented his Medal of Honor resurfaced. His past association with the Lincoln Brigade, which fought against fascists in Spain, was now reframed as evidence of communist subversion. Edward Carter was deemed a security risk. He lost his job. He was barred from employment in various sectors. The Army had needed him to fight the Axis, but the country now ostracized him for fighting fascism too early and in the wrong places. He lived a quiet life in Los Angeles, working whatever jobs he could find, the ghost of the battlefield clinging to him, the true recognition of his sacrifice locked away in a dusty, prejudiced file cabinet. The true ending to Edward Carter's saga would not come for over 50 years. In the 1990s, the United States Army conducted a sweeping review of the Distinguished Service Cross Awards given to African American soldiers during World War II, seeking to correct historical injustices where racism had demonstrably influenced the awarding of medals. Carter's file was finally pulled clean of the toxic political assumptions and reviewed purely on the basis of the facts presented in the field reports of March 1945. The testimony of the officers, the medical records, and the stunning combat record could no longer be denied or diminished. On January 13, 1997, over a half-century after the blood was spilled in the German snow, President William Jefferson Clinton awarded Staff Sergeant Edward A. Carter, Jr. the Medal of Honor posthumously. Edward Carter had died in 1979, never having witnessed the full recognition of his valor. He was one of 7 African-American soldiers to receive the Medal of Honor in that ceremony, finally confirming the impossible truth of his actions. The Army citation reads with the stark simplicity that belies the horror of that day. Through his heroism and an intrepid fighting spirit, Staff Sergeant Carter inspired and led the remaining members of his squad to continue the advance. But those who know the full story, those who know about the 5 wounds and the 6 dead Germans understand that on that cold morning in Speyer, Staff Sergeant Edward Carter did more than just lead an advance. He was murdered, and he came back to life, and he killed his murderers simply because they had insulted a warrior who had fought for the freedom they sought to deny him. He was the ghost of the Rhineland, a man who refused to stay dead until the job was done, and his story remains a searing testament to the price of courage and the slow, grinding correction of history.